Good evening. Thank you for everybody for coming. This is the second communication committee meeting that we've had under the new format. So I kind of sent out a really rough agenda. I'm just kind of putting it up here. We don't have really a full board committee again, so I don't know if we want to try to have that chair conversation again, or if we're holding off again until we get more of a full committee. And Heather is here and agreed to take minutes again. So thank you for that. And then outside of that, two kind of main items, one being we talked about mobile app last time and wanted to talk more about it. I have some data and things like that that we could talk about and look at. Budget communications, kind of a generic item. Just had a few quick things to kind of talk about, bring up, and maybe brainstorm for perhaps a future meeting. And then picking a next meeting topic. So I guess, does anybody feel like wanting to be chair and taking over that part? Are we still chairless at this point?
I don't want to volunteer to be a chair, but I do feel like we need a chair. And I think that this is what we have. If we wait until, I think we should proceed.
So I will gladly take the chair position with one stipulation. I can't do the minute taking. I get too in the conversation and forget to take the notes.
It sounds like Heather's agreed to take minutes, and then it sounds like Jen's willing to serve as a backup.
Yes.
Okay, so we do have people to take minutes.
Perfect. Then I will.
All right, so
become
we
chair.
do have a chair. So we can have some sort of meeting before the next meeting and just kind of talk over stuff and go from there.
Sure.
So I guess just since I prepared this particular.
Wait, you can just talk.
Can
I
I
really-
ask a question?
Other people here.
What's that?
Like, I don't think I know.
Oh,
how to
yeah,
introduce more people.
Yeah, we could certainly do another introduction.
Sorry.
No, that would be a good idea. I forgot that you weren't at the last one, so
Yeah.
yeah. So I guess if we want to just go around one more time real quick, let everybody know who you are. Obviously, you guys can't see Heather Dean and John McCarthy because they're on my screen, but I guess if Heather, you want to just kind of say hi and your name and where you're from.
Hi, everybody. Sorry I can't be there tonight. I got to do some family things. I'm Heather Dean. I am a second grade teacher at Ridge Memorial School. I'm also the district mentor coordinator.
All right, and then John.
Hi, John McCarthy's school board member, and I'm just glad to be here at my first communications committee meeting. And appreciate you, Nick, putting this together. And I just have a quick question. Who was that who just volunteered to chair the committee?
We'll have her introduce herself next.
Okay, great.
I'm Daisy Hawk. I am a parent of a JGS student, and I am also a school board member. And I'm the one that just volunteered to be chair.
Thank you. I heard you volunteer, but at first I thought it was Jen, and then I realized no, it wasn't Jen. So sorry.
It's okay.
Jen has.
And thank you, Daisy.
I'm Deanna Wilson. I am a parent of 2 CHS students, just on the committee.
I'm Megan Pura. I'm the library media specialist for Coden High School and Jeffrey Ridge Middle School.
And I'm Jen Horn. I'm the director of student services for the district. And a parent of one more high school student.
And I am Nicholas Handy, communications coordinator and the school board secretary. I also have a daughter at JGS. All right, so now we've all been introduced again. So move them back over here. Then again, just because I obviously didn't talk to Daisy before this meeting, I'll run through the slideshow, but then future ones will coordinate and work that way. So we did our housekeeping, so we can move on to mobile app data. So last time we spoke, we kind of went over the app when it was, brought into place. One of the things that was discussed was this idea of maybe promoting it a little bit more. I wanted to bring in some data to show kind of where we're at. So just real quick, we did end up promoting on the website in the news section. We did promote on social media in early November. And we did have all of our school newsletters push that out. I think there's some frequency difference between the two. I think some did it once or twice. I think others, it's just kind of a piece that's attached now to the newsletter. So that was kind of the big promotion that we did between the last time we met and now. Here's some just kind of quick statistical numbers, looking at lifetime, the past 6 months and the past 30 days. Looking at both downloads and page views. So obviously page view would be anytime somebody goes onto a specific page on the app. So we're up to, 427, so up over 400. I think last time we were at about 350. So we have picked up, a decent amount in the last period. Obviously still can continue to grow from there. You think about, every staff member, every parent, community members, so on. That definitely could continue to grow. I did pull two data points real quick. This is looking at the number of downloads over the past 6 months. Obviously, you see that big jump kind of at the beginning of school, which is one of the periods that we promoted this year. And then you look again in that November window, getting, a spike of almost 30 in a day. So that does show that when we have active promotion, we do have the ability to, get more people to come in. But then when you look at the 6 months views, we don't necessarily see a similar spike when we get more users. We didn't gather a certain amount more, and we're seeing more views. So
We have an extra participant.
looks like we have a cricket.
Problem solved.
But yeah, so that just, like I said, it kind of paints the picture that we did get an increase in people. That promotion does work in terms of getting us more downloads, but those downloads don't always necessarily correspond with additional views in the mobile app, because you can see the small spikes when people actually download, both that one at the beginning of the year and then the one in November. But then there's still that kind of more or less similar area.
I have a question for you,
Yeah, of course.
and I feel bad asking this because I didn't ask it beforehand, but is the app used more often, like on school board nights? Are people going into it on school board nights to get the information to participate? Is that
There
mostly me
doesn't
that participates?
there doesn't seem to be a direct correlation with like any one night of
Or
the
even-
week
okay.
or event that's really kind of driving it. But on the next slide, we at least have our most popular page drivers being the calendar, athletics, news, food services, and school board. And obviously you can see that there's a pretty big amount of people for the calendar and athletics, and then it kind of drops again for news and food services, then it drops again for school board. Everything below that's like 200 pages or less, and this is within the past 6 months, these number of page views. So it really seems like people are, have a specific set of things that they're going for, the calendar being a big one. Athletics, I think it's just a direct link into the athletics website. News, they get, segmented by their school or schools that they choose. I've been having some talks with specifically elementary principals about perhaps putting the newsletters in the news section. We have our own spot on the website and our own button specifically for newsletters, but some of them have talked about that idea of just having that streaming steady source of news to be able to maybe drive up that section a little bit. And then the last thing I wanted to bring up was just some next steps for the app. I do want to work on integration of our notification system so that when we get, a snow day, not only are we doing all the things we normally do, but if they have the app, they can have that, ping on the phone just as an additional thing. I mean, I get that a lot of people are already getting a phone call and, an email and things like that, but eventually down the line, we're hoping to be able to have more kind of customization in terms of how people want to be communicated to and how they would receive that type of messaging. Obviously, further promotion of the app is going to be important. Again, we've shown that we can get more people to come in when we promote it. We're not necessarily seeing those, page numbers go up. So looking at also app optimization and maybe a little bit of cross comparing the data on the app versus the data for the website to see if there are certain areas that people are looking a lot on the website that aren't captured in the app. And then also just looking at maybe are there ways that we can clean up links and pare down information more so that it's just very easy. Like I remember at one point we had talked about having like a direct school board link where people could just click into it and they'd be able to be immediately brought to Zoom. I have since reorganized how we do the Zoom webinar feature for the school board meetings, and that we now have the same webinar code for every single meeting. So if you memorize that number, or if you just moving forward, and then we've also dropped the password because we don't really need it with the webinar kind of separation. And then looking at just adding in that link so that it's more direct. So that'll be a next step as well. And those were kind of the main points for the app that I had brought up. Or
Is it possible to put forms on the app? So like registration forms and access to certain Google forms, like the intent to homeschool form that people can, is that a possibility?
yeah, I mean, more or less, anything that we have on the website, because like I said, the app essentially works as kind of a hub to bring you somewhere. So if it's on the website, we can link to that page, and we already have that existing forms page. So if we created a button, you could, click the button, it would pull up that page that has all the forms, and then people could fill them out from there. So that's certainly an additional button that we can do, and we have the ability to add as many buttons as we want onto that app. So if we wanted 3, 4, 7 pages of buttons, we could. Obviously, you don't want that many because it just gets convoluted, but we could either look at what do we want to remove to put that up there, or do we want to maybe add a second? There's already a second page, but it's just things like links to our Facebook page, our YouTube, other things like that. So
At this point, I think you could get rid of the COVID-19 resources as a button.
yeah, that could be an easy replacement right there.
Not all of our forms are handheld, user-friendly, but maybe some of them, that would be another place for people to access things.
So like I said, that concludes that part of the presentation. So at this point, it's Q&A, it's development of ideas. I guess at this point, I can hand it over to you for now, Daisy. What was that?
Oh, I just can't open the app here. I have no cell phone.
Well, this is what it looks like.
I do have it though. No, I do. I downloaded it and everything. It just.
It's a lot of thinking.
I do think having the push notifications eventually on the apps is good because people it doesn't matter how many times different ways you tell people, someone misses it. So give them as many options as possible.
Yep.
Well, and the goal is to try to integrate things in a way that there's less steps too. So trying to work with our company School Messenger in the back end so that we can try to get things where we're not having to if I do because I'm involved with the snow day process. So if we do a snow day, a 2-hour delay cancellation, Ruben's gonna do the all call. He's gonna do an email. I'm gonna put it up on Facebook and Instagram. We have, I think, 5 broadcast companies we go through, like WMUR, Fox, things like that. And then we have we email out to Monadnock Radio Group, and one email takes care of all that. But that's still, 2 people and 4, 5, 6, 7 steps just to disperse all that information. So the more, like I said, I'm just trying to work to optimize that back end process so we don't have to push things out in so many different ways.
I think if you did a notification, an app notification, everyone would get it at the same time. There's a lot of talk at our house about who gets the phone call first.
Yeah, I don't know if
And which is neither here nor there, but it is a thing.
It is, because I get the phone call easily a good 10 to 15 minutes sooner than my husband does. And I don't know if it's because I'm a parent and school board member and like
I don't know if
I
there's
have
any
no
rhyme
idea.
or reason for it, but it is funny.
I've always gotten it a good 10, 15 minutes before my husband's. And as soon as I see it come up, I put it on speakerphone because I know it's a recording, and then the whole house can hear it. And then like 10 minutes later, my husband gets his phone call and he's like, well, I can ignore that because I already know what it says.
I mean, when I get the report, it's alphabetical, but I don't know if they call out that way. I would think that if you're in the same household and you're getting it at that dramatic of a different time, it wouldn't be the case, because even between my work phone and my personal phone, I can sometimes be as much as 5 to 7 minutes apart. So
So I'm just wondering if it would be an instantaneous, like the emails all go at once. Anyway, neither here nor there, just a funny thing to contemplate.
Well, then your kids are all gonna go, did you get it? Because I just got it.
Any other thoughts or questions?
I guess that is another point, that other people right now, to get the phone call, you have to be part of the system, but anybody can get the app.
Mhm.
And they then, that would be able to share with a greater community, including students. Because they can download the app, so that is actually a valid. We're
Also
trying to
helpful
get,
for, yeah, like grandparents or
Yeah.
anyone else who has kids on snow days.
The
or local
babysitter.
community.
the grocery store, I mean. It,
Oh, look, the kids have no school. Let's call in all the teenagers to work today.
it is an easy way to get the information out to a greater community, even better than, or different than Facebook.
Yeah, it's just that additional tool and that way to, reach a different type of audience. I mean, I just was recently running the data reports for our Facebook usage and things like that. And we have a very specific audience that, tunes into all our Facebook stuff. It's 20 to 55 is 80% of our audience. So we can use that data to say okay, we can reach a certain group of people through Facebook. Instagram, we have a slightly younger audience. We don't have as big of an audience, but so just being mindful of those different types of pockets and statistics and how we can, again, open up to the community more. I mean, it could be nice to eventually down the line have a way for community members to perhaps get involved in different communication portals and things like that, but that's a little down the road.
That's something I hadn't thought about. Have, you may not know, but share, do you know if anyone shared how many times it was shared on Facebook, to the Ringe Facebook site or Jaffrey Facebook site? Because community member, I wasn't even thinking that other community members might want to know, oh, there is quick and easy access to the calendar. Their kids might not go here, but they may like to come to the plays and stuff for grandkids or whatnot.
Now, are you just referring to in general?
Yeah, in general, I didn't know if you, when you post something, you can usually see how many times it's been shared.
Yeah, I get a lot of data from social media. I get a number of different metrics in terms of kind of how deep it's drilled in terms of did somebody just see it? Did they comment? Did they like it?
Okay.
I don't necessarily get to see all the comments or all the shares because that deals with people's individual privacy settings.
Yeah.
But I'll at least be able to see this thing got shared 17 times. Even though your post only has 4 comments on it, throughout all of the shares, there's 27 comments. So we're able to use that type of data. It also helps categorize like when things are being viewed more.
Yeah.
So it'll say like, hey, post it at this time because it's a more popular time that your viewers and your audience is on social media. So
Oh, that's good to know.
yeah, so we do have a lot of really good like data points to go off of for things like that, just to be able to target in those different ways. But
Good job on the app.
and yeah, obviously we can continue to grow it, promote it, so on. So. All right, and then this item's a little bit more generic, but I did think it was worth mentioning just because we are the communication committee. So obviously we are in, budget season, voting season, whatever you want to call it. We have deliberative session coming up next Wednesday. We have voting coming in March. And there's been some short range goals that have been determined in terms of just like getting more communication and more involvement out there. There's also some long-term kind of goals or thoughts in terms of just making it a more regular type of communication, more or less. So just a few kind of quick points. Working toward trying to develop more consistent communication around, great things that we have going on, budget needs of the district, things like that throughout the year, so that we're not just kind of budget, like crunching around budget season to say, oh, here's what we need, here's the voting, so on and so forth. One of the, I guess, deliverables that hopefully everybody that lives in Jaffrey and Range has received at this point, but there was a like a flyer developed that we circulated just to kind of get some information out there. And there's thoughts that we'd be doing this, maybe twice to 4 times a year down the line, but just creating more of a public facing newsletter just to kind of explain different things that are going on and also to kind of look at different issues. So obviously this one's a little bit more budget focused just because that's timely. But being able to just kind of explain things like, okay, it's budget season, let's talk about inflation, a big driver is looking at buildings and just some of the great things we have going on that we've done with the buildings, some of the projects we have going on, looking at, because we present people with a proposed budget and a default budget, kind of explaining what those 2 different numbers are and how we arrive at each of those numbers. So just kind of trying to be like educational with certain things, looking at programs and culture and just kind of saying some of the great things in broad strokes that are going on at the different school levels, and then just letting people have that reminder of like, here's when you can file for an open position, here's deliberative session, here's how you can reach out. So just kind of creating that more, that bit of dialogue around everything. I mean, a lot of our messaging and planning has this whole concept of the 3 C's, which is community, communication, and collaboration. So trying to create more resources that I guess can speak to that issue that got brought up earlier of we are a larger community than just like the parents and the teachers and people like that, being able to have that information be, put out there. And then we decided to physically mail it, obviously, because again, well, a lot of our technology, advancements with technology, we're doing everything on our phones, we're talking about an app and things like that. Not everybody communicates in that way, not everybody has that ability. So looking at like different ways that we can just, again, target different types of people. But part of the reason why I wanted to bring it up is that we have a communication plan that speaks very like broad strokes to communication, things like when we revamp the website, revamping policy and things like that, looking at how we can get students more involved. But there aren't always those like kind of nitty gritty details of like different types of content that we want, different ways to communicate content, maybe even planning around emergencies and how we should communicate that information out. So I'm almost wondering if maybe there's kind of a supplement to that plan that kind of gets created that just adds to it and shows more of those kind of, hey, we want to have a monthly communication about this. We want to have this type of newsletter. We want to, maybe we want to highlight a staff member once a month. You know, we do our retirees and we do our new staff, but like maybe there's other ways that we want to promote information. So it was just something I wanted to bring up to this committee conceptually as kind of a, hey, let's perhaps put our heads together, brainstorm, and see how we can maybe start to fill those gaps. So we're not focusing so much on communicating specific types of information in specific timeframes. And we can just kind of throughout the year constantly be talking about all these different discussion points.
I definitely like the idea of the flyer that went out. I think that's great because a lot of, especially the older community members that are really adamant about what we spend our money on tend to look at mail more than social media and electronics. I think doing that at least once a quarter of, hey, this is what your money's going towards. Like, look at all we've done for improvements, look at how well it's benefiting, not just the students, but the community as a whole. Goes a long way in getting people to say yes to budgets. Even when it's not budget season, like having that in the back of their mind more than just budget season would be helpful.
If I can chime in. It seems like this is an important moment for us to get these messages out. Our taxes have gone up a lot in these two communities over the last few years, and this budget, if it's passed, will increase the taxes some more. But in a lot of ways, we've been operating on a shoestring. I don't think people really understand that. The state issued its cost of education per pupil a few weeks ago. I think it was January 3rd. And, you know, it turns out that our cost in this district is the 23rd lowest out of 177 districts. So, you know, we're quite a bit below the state average in cost per pupil. And I don't think our community knows that. And since everybody knows that their taxes are going up, it's an important message to get out.
I see that you had raised your hand, Heather. I don't know if you were wanting to speak or not, but you're free to, you know, kind of chime in whenever you want.
I didn't want to like interject on anybody. So it was back when we were having the discussion on the flyer. I just wanted to chime in because I know, speaking from being a teacher at RMS, a lot of us got the email that Nikki had shared out, and then many of us we send out either weekly or monthly newsletters, and we put the link in our newsletters. So that was just another way to communicate it out to families.
And we do plan on kind of dissecting it a little bit to put it up on social media, just because obviously if you're looking at this on a phone, it very quickly becomes very small.
Yep.
But we're working on how we can break up the different sections so that you can kind of have like a slideshow of sorts and just be able to say, okay, here's 1, 2, 3, 4, and all your different points. And then also,
I would be interested to, has there been any feedback from, so I knew what was in there because I was part of it, so I don't, but like, what was your feedback? What did you think about it as a document and its usefulness? And did you get any other feedback from people? Is anybody else talking about it?
I haven't heard anyone talk about it. I thought it was a great idea when it came in the mail, just because my thought was, I know a lot of people that don't have kids that go into school that need to know that information when they're voting on the budget. Because a lot of them just say, oh, I don't have a kid that goes there, let me vote no. So I did think it was very helpful for that. But I haven't heard anybody else talk about it on social media or otherwise.
and I didn't get any specific feedback, but I also wasn't in last week. So I talked to Leslie this morning and she had said there wasn't any like direct to the SAU feedback. But we did also work on distributing some copies. I think we got some in at least one of the libraries and some other places. We're trying to work with like organizations that we share their flyers. We reached out to all of them and just said, oh, would you mind distributing this? Some of them said, yes, you know, this is great. Others said, hey, it's not really a part of our mission, so we're not going to do that. But yeah, so we are trying to get it out there in different ways, again, whether it's digital, whether it's you're getting it on your phone, whether you're getting it in person. And we can strategize down the line, because obviously if we do this like super regularly and we're mailing out to everybody, there's a little bit more of a, financial cost that we would have to plan on in years down the road.
I think if you were doing it more regularly, at least it could be a shorter condensed one that would be easier to post online as well. Downfall of the mailers is you really don't know how many people throw them away or look at it, where at least if it's a link or something, you can get that data to see how many people clicked on it.
When we went for, bright, colorful, not a lot of writing on there, we tried to be very conscious about all the word choices to make sure that like it was very easy to understand. Sometimes we're talking at school board meetings and it's like we're very up here talking about like and all the educational jargon. There's people that are involved in the budget every year, so they just kind of know all the information. We wanted to try to create that document that's like, hey, like here it is in a good layman's language so that you can kind of understand it. You don't have to pick up a dictionary. You don't have to call the school to say, hey, what does this word mean? What does this concept mean? So we're trying to be more mindful of that messaging and making sure that anybody can understand it, whether you're involved or not.
I know in my household, my husband got the mail whatever day it came, and all he saw when he first was going through was postmaster customer, and he immediately threw it in the trash can. And as it left his hand, it flipped and he saw school district and he's like, oh, I might need to read that. So if there's all the people who don't, if it's not addressed personally to you, that they're gonna throw it away, because my husband was one of them.
Mine wasn't folded. Mine was just a,
Yeah,
it
mine,
wasn't either, which
ours
I
was
thought-
just straight, and he looked at the address, didn't have our address, and he just,
Honestly,
it away.
that was one of the things that made me look at it, was it wasn't a folded thing to like the. Oh, just a random thing. I'm like, oh, figured it had to, I'm like, oh, it's a flyer of some sort. What's this flyer for? But
Was
if
it
it
like
was-
in like a postcard or did it?
it's
No.
multiple pages and it's different kind of paper too. So
yeah,
it didn't feel like anything else that I get in the mail.
right. That's what made me look at it and go, what is this? Cause it wasn't.
it was the
I
like
honestly- At
glossy.
first, I thought it was just like another college, cause I get a lot of stuff, cause my son's a senior, like something from one of the other colleges for him, and I'm like, oh, I gotta put that aside for him. And looked and went, oh, that's not for him, that's the school.
Yeah, I think it was an 11.5 by 7, or sorry, an 11 by 17 sheet of paper or whatever. And I wasn't involved in the mailing out or the proofing of it. So I don't know if there was an intention to fold it and it just didn't happen, or if it just, why it went out the way it did. But if it at least got some people to be like, oh, hey, this is weird because it's, bigger and whatever, then I don't know, maybe maybe we need to mess around with like different sizes and shapes of paper. Do something in a star shape or I don't know.
Can we send stars?
Hearts, it's Valentine's Day.
Yeah, I mean, you're never gonna please everybody, because some people are gonna be like, well, why did they waste the money spending that? And then other people are gonna come across something they never knew before because
Mhm.
you sent it out like that. You can't please everyone, but it kept me from throwing it in the trash, so.
Can I ask a clarifying question? Because I didn't know what the mailers looked like. So the return address didn't say, it just said school board or something?
I don't honestly remember what the address was on it. It was just.
I don't
like a-
remember for a return address, but for my address, it didn't have an address, it just had the postmaster customer generic thing.
Gotcha.
Cause it was one of the mailings that gets sent to everybody in the town.
Yeah, it's an EDDM or whatever it is. So what we do is when we print stuff like that, we work with Sabrin. They have a relationship with the post office. They know how many households there are, so they print out the appropriate amount. And then they just send it off to the post offices and they just kind of do the one in every mailbox type of thing. So I don't know if it had like a
And-
return address or anything like that.
I do have to say, one of the reasons that it kept me from throwing away was that it was not election season. I would not do that during election season because that's when all of my mail gets thrown away.
Yep.
It's not.
True.
Yep.
So yeah, like I said, I think the one other kind of part that's maybe a little bit more committee focused would just be, maybe taking some time, and I don't know if it's maybe between this meeting and next meeting, or maybe we have a whole meeting devoted to it, but looking at like different types of messages, different things that we could do, different ways to promote different things. And maybe have a little bit more planning around like, we do these types of posts this often and they go here. This is our process for communicating, in an emergency, just so that we have some of those things kind of spelled out somewhere so that there's more of an overarching plan of, like, for example, social media approach. I'm largely reliant right now on just either being aware of things and posting them, or people reaching out and saying, oh, hey, here's this thing, talk about it, please. I meet with each principal once a month and kind of try to talk about different things like that, just to make sure that we're in the loop and getting things out there. But, just kind of opening up that conversation about different types of communication.
I think adding it to the agenda for the next time would be good. Figuring out the different ways we wanna do each thing, and especially how we wanna make sure we're getting out to the community at large as well, and not just the district, the people currently going to school here.
Well, that seems to be a good segue, unless there were any other questions or thoughts or ideas, to talk about future meeting topics and things like that. We said that in coming together, we were going to be more of a proactive committee. You got something, John?
Oh, yes. I don't know if this is within the scope of this committee, but I know that the committee to talk about budget communication had a couple of other steps that are at least tentatively planned. And some of those include, excuse me, talking to organizations like the Chamber of Commerce, the Lions Club, the Rotary Club, maybe even approaching some of the churches. And I think, the idea is really focused on the awareness that if you're not a parent of a student, you probably aren't as connected to the schools. And there are a lot of things that we're doing. And I know one of the focuses has been the activities program, and how the sports teams have expanded considerably, and how there are new sports like volleyball and pickleball and so forth, but also how the JV teams have expanded from, maybe a dozen players up to 20. So, there is a feeling that we have a lot of work to do to get our message out to people in the community, that we're an important part of the community, and that our role is changing. So.
And I think that's a good point. And again, speaks to that kind of idea, the 3 C's in terms of community, communication, collaboration. Obviously there's a lot of promotion the district can do that certain groups can do, but the more that we can do to kind of have those organic conversations with different groups, different people in town, obviously social media, its own beast when it comes to the way people communicate and how things get distributed, and you only have so much you can control over that. But like, if we can kind of also start fostering and finding ways to grow that like person to person communication, and that like creating people and systems so that you can say, oh, hey, like I'm a little confused as to what's going on, but I know I can reach out to these people and they're more in the know, or I know that I can reach out to this group and they have information. So one of the things that we've talked about in terms of budget communication and other things is trying to, again, work with some of these partners and organizations, nonprofits in town. So that's a good point to bring up and just something to consider kind of as we move forward, both immediately and long term.
Maybe like involving the interact group, because it's not a school club, but they do go out into the community and help, and there's learners that we know, and my Tenders, who was a French teacher here, is like one of the advisors for the group, and just like working with in the community that we already have connections with, and trying to get them to help reach out to the other groups they work with, because I know they work with other communities within here, so.
Yeah, and I know we have a couple different like leadership type organizations at like the middle high school level. So maybe tapping into some of those different groups too, just to kind of get the students more involved in things. Like we kind of have like smaller pockets where things are, you know, working or expanding. Like we're working on bringing back like childcare for deliberative session. That was something that went away during like COVID and stuff, and we're trying to bring that back in. That sounds like Interact and I think another group are gonna help out with that.
National Honor Society, I bet.
Mm.
I bet National Honor Society.
Yeah, that was the other one.
Or that class that has to do so many community hours too, like community
Civics,
service
civics
hours.
class.
They would probably be like, hey, we know this coming up. I know you're looking for hours. Let's band together. Type of thing.
And I think even just having, you know, different events and things like that, getting more involvement.
At the elementary committee, so we have a committee that's looking at the elementary schools and any potential options for change and shift to be as efficient and productive as we can. We talked a lot in our last meeting about volunteers and getting the community involved in different ways. And frankly, there's not an easy way to know what we're looking for volunteers. So that's another piece I think that we can look at. How do we get that information out? And how do we keep it updated? How do we get volunteers in? What does that look like? And again, that collaboration outside of people who have kids, but the greater, how do we get people in our buildings to see what's going on? Because I think you can say, this is where your money's going, but you really need to come in and see that what the kids are doing on a shoestring budget. Come and look at how well we're doing with what we have. Walk into classrooms and see classrooms that have updated furniture and classrooms that don't. And yet we're still doing the best we possibly can, but I think people need to be in the buildings and see it and feel it. I mean, even in the last 5 years, the difference in the buildings, it just feels really good. It's positive, and we're really tight on a budget. It's not fancy, but it's good.
Family delivery.
I think that brings up a good point in that like we've obviously made a lot of efforts to try to modernize our communication and try to make sure that it's more accessible. And obviously there's always more work that can be done. But I think that human element is also important moving forward, because the more you go digital, the more you have the tendency to kind of lose that person to person and that, you know, kind of physical. So I think the more we can work on creating that, you know, growing some of these groups that have external involvement. I know that there's, you know, any number of committees that are meeting on things like elementary and athletic facilities. You know, maybe it's also expanding, you know, like board committees so that there's more public participation in those, so that there's more stake instead of just kind of having a lot of these like meetings that happen. And it's not that they happen, you know, in a vacuum, but they're not attended and, you know, viewed. So just trying to find ways that we can promote and get those different people that may, you know, maybe I'm not interested in working on the education committee, but I have a big background in facilities and I want to, you know, help with that process and lend my expertise in that way. So I think it's,
Or maybe I'm really good at knitting.
yeah, getting more.
And the elementary school wants to have a knitting club. But we don't know that because
Yeah.
there's
More information.
more, yeah. More people that could say, I could bring this to you, and more of us saying, we're kind of looking for somebody who could do this. Anybody out there interested?
I think that bringing up that whole idea of like people maybe having certain areas of expertise and being able to bring them in and say, you know, hey, we are going to run a small unit on knitting or whatever it is that people are passionate about. And then, because I think we do a lot of time looking internally when it comes to like club advisors and things like that, but there's not always that big community outreach of like, hey, like, do you want to run a club? Like, do you have an interest that you could share with our students? So. So I know we'd brought up future topic being kind of discussing some of those communication things that I brought up in a little more depth. There are other things that the committee would want to talk about next meeting, future meetings. Obviously, we meet every 2 to 3 months. We don't need to, you know, if people come up with an idea a week, a month down the road, obviously reach out to Daisy and I, and we can pull that together. And I know we said that we're meeting quarterly during the school year so that we don't have to worry about summer. So next meeting toward the end of Q3, does anybody know roughly what time that would be?
April? I think it's April.
So like April and then like
Early
June,
April.
probably. Okay. So that was all I had on the agenda, so. I don't know if anybody's got anything else. Any
Think
of
we're
our online people got anything?
I got 6 pages of notes.
Oh, good grief.
She is the master note taker.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
And yeah, I guess thanks to everybody participating. And Daisy, thanks for taking on the chairship.
You're
and,
welcome.
Yeah. And thank you, Nick,
You're
for all
welcome.
your work.
All right, does anybody want to declare this adjourned and,
So declared.
all right, awesome. Have a good night, everybody online.